day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Modern Engineers, and a little bit of a special episode today. Since I've reached the milestone of 25 episodes, I thought I'd save you all the horror of, this. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day, ladies and gentlemen. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that my first videos are a little bit terrible. And that's because I was recording off the microphone in my computer, which was running at the same time, at full fans, and basically over the sound of a jet engine. So obviously that's not how this is going to work. So to save you from all that horror, I'm going to make a recapisode. It's basically, I'm going to recount the story as it stands, where I am, and so that it makes it a little bit easier for people to just kind of jump into the series from now, since I've seemed to have figured out my formatting issues. So without further ado, let's get started. So first, I'm this old ship. I am the host of this show that you're watching called Modern Engineers. Hello. Now, what is Modern Engineers? Well, it's quite simple. This is just a heavily modified version of Space Engineers, where I play with the theme of modern equipment and technology only. Now, I don't have to build exact replicas, but I just have to follow the rules of those building techniques that were used. An example I like to use when describing the gameplay, picture that there is a river in front of you, and you have a car. Now in Space Engineers, you typically just either drive through the river, ignoring it completely, putting a thruster on the back and just floating right across, or you put thrusters on your car and fly over, or you use your jetpack and go over to the other side. Those are all valid ways of crossing the river, Space Engineer style. However, Modern Engineers requires me to either build a bridge or use a barge to get the vehicles across. Now, why would I torment myself with this? Well, very simple. I've been playing Space Engineers for only a few hours, and I kind of got the idea that I kind of know how the game works. I'm not really great at the whole building spaceships thing. I'm not really great at the whole building things that are popular. Just look at my Steam Workshop and you'll find out. But I am good at one thing, and that is building ships, and I really enjoy building ships. So how this all started was a couple of years ago, I joined a server called SEMB, or Space Engineers and Naval Battles. Granted, I was building ships long before then, using Minecraft, before I realized that Space Engineers allowed me to do everything only without the mods. However, when I went to build my first ship in SEMB for a naval fight, I realized there was a lot of rules, and ultimately this kind of just restricted the type of gameplay that I wanted out of my ships. See, I like Cold War vessels. SEMB prefers World War II ships or sailing ships. And I see the preference, but it's not mine. So a couple years ago, I decided to start my own world in a survival setting where I build my own ships from the keel up with one purpose in mind: to make the best ships that I could ever make. Now I hear you asking, why did I start it in survival and not creative? Well, they always say that restriction is the catalyst for creativity. If you have to build things to survive a fight, then you at least have to build them to survive in general. On top of that, it adds more complexity to the ship, like food storage, supplies, things that you don't really think about in creative mode because all of those needs are met. Every rule that I've added to this gameplay is to encourage more creative building processes and better building in general when it comes to the ships and the designs, to make them not only look lifelike but feel lifelike. So I started with a simple pier, a slipway, and one ship, the Terror. Now ignore the older photos of her. She's undergone quite a few changes to get to where she is now. A lot of it was just me figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and refitting, redesigning, doing multiple things. Now, in here comes our first problem. I hadn't quite discovered it yet, but I was running a mod called Industrial Overhaul. For those of you unaware, Industrial Overhaul completely changes the production side of the game to make it more realistic and changes the power side. it's an overhaul of the entire game to change how the basic machines and mechanics work. Kind of more of a Factorio style of the gameplay. There is one catch, however. Industrial Overhaul requires modded planets with the ores that you need to be able to build things, specific things like bauxite, which replaces the interior plates side of the tech tree. So when I first built Terror, I was on a world that actually had none of these resources, and at first I thought I'd just power through it, till I realized I needed interior components. And thus, the first world was no more. At the time that I was building, a new world had just hit the workshop, and it was proposed to be incredible. Fighting, wars, different types of factions that you can interact with. Basically, the gameplay side of Space Engineers that's been missing for the last 15 years of the game. This world was called Agaris at War, which fostered to have one of the best gameplay modes offered in the game. It was developed by Captain Arthur, and one of the best ways to play the game. So I decided to set up shop, and there began one of the longest gameplays I've ever done in my life. It lasted about 2 years of playing this game, building ships, building piers. I played with other people. It was super fun. We built multiple different types of vessels, fought multiple different kinds of people, and it was super fun. And thus, the theory of modern engineers was born. Because I didn't just want another game playthrough of Space Engineers where eventually people would come on board and just build a helicarrier and just wipe me out. I wanted the restriction of modern technology. For example, if I use a railgun, I get 20 shots out of it before I have to rebuild the gun. This limits the use of me wanting to put railguns on every single ship. However, you can't write rules that the AI that automatically spawns in the game will follow. And that itself is the challenge, because they will build helicarriers, they will build nuclear powered monsters, while you're stuck with gas turbine driven frigates. And for those of you unfamiliar with Agaris at War, you're on the losing side of a war. It's your job to turn the tide in your favor to basically stop the GC from taking over the planet. So thus the need for a navy was developed. So I built ships. I kept building ships. And eventually I would encounter the enemy, fight them with battleships or other ships, and take their ships and use them to build materials. However, as the game continued, a new up and coming game was coming out called Ares at War. Now, I was perfectly happy with Agaris at War, and I wasn't going to change because Ares at War added an entire solar system, whereas Agaris at War was just one planet and one moon, and I was completely happy with never ever leaving the planet, except for maybe some space missions to do satellites and a few other things. That's still in the future, but I digress. However, what Captain Arthur has achieved with Ares at War is just incredible. One, it's a good looking mod. Everything is amazing. The world feels lived in. The amount of coding it must take to make this work is just insane and boggles my mind. It just caters to just about any type of person who wants to play Space Engineers. I knew eventually I was going to have to move to Ares at War because I wanted that gameplay. However, it just wasn't something I wanted to do because it would require moving save files, and that's always a hassle. That was until the crashes started. The game constantly crashed, and I would find that I would get about 2 hours of gameplay and then the game would crash. So, obviously, a new save file was needed, and I decided to start moving everything over to Ares at War. And this is where Modern Engineers starts, at least the recording side. I asked a few people on Discord who I was constantly sharing photos of my work from, and they all kind of encouraged me to start recording and making YouTube videos. This is all still kind of just an experiment because I'm still active duty and I still work my tail off, and getting time to play, record, edit, all that, it takes a lot of time. So I wasn't too sure about it on the start. However, it's proven to be quite fun, and a lot of people seem to be enjoying this gameplay. So this is all the context to why this show exists. Let's get to where the show is right now. Ah, yes, episode 1. Well, I have unfortunate news for those of you who are just joining the series. I'm sorry. Episode 1 audio is so terrible. This was the first time I've ever done anything on YouTube, and I honestly have the policy that where If I mess up, I want to publicly show that mess up so that you guys can learn from it and so I can learn from it. Because there's no point in just erasing your mistakes. So the audio quality is terrible, but that's okay because the first couple episodes are just arrivals. A lot of the ships were moving. I opted that I would have a specific set of rules for the move. For example, each ship had a dice roll based on whether or not they'd get there intact. In fact, what you see of the ships arriving in the first couple episodes, those are not all the ships I had. Not all of the ships made it. An entire barge, a couple of other smaller ships failed to make it. And I opted that as a kind of a moving through hostile territory over long distances kind of thing. So the ships that did make it were ones that were supported or ones that were already in good condition, like the Terror here. Now, we do have to address the base thing. Most survival playthroughs that you see, people kind of just start with a refinery and a drop pod and then kind of build themselves up from there. However, I didn't want to sit here for 6 weeks while I rebuilt a dry dock or rebuilt a slipway or anything like that. It would just take too long. So I made a rule that allowed me to transfer my old base from my old save. However, there were some conditions. One, I could not keep anything from the base in its storage containers. All the containers had to be removed from the base. Two, anything that wasn't physically attached to the base was removed. And three, any supporting structures that were around the base are gone. This is why most of the time you see me struggling just with the production line, because all of my production lines are still in the old save and they're no longer around. In fact, in my old save, the number one thing that was getting me parts was actually sinking enemy ships, which leads on to the other issue. Areas at War hasn't quite worked for me. Mostly just the MES issue. The modular encounter system is broken, which prevents me from actually having things spawn in the game. Now, in the first couple episodes, I moved this game to a separate server, or my other computer, which I was using for some time-lapse videos, which is why those are gone now. I did this to try and solve the issues I was having with MES. Now, why didn't I just go to a different save or play a different game? It's because I wanted to play this one, and I also knew that I was always going to find the problem and solve the problem. And I'm happy to announce I did solve the problem. And in a future episode, you will see the exact moment that it's solved and my reaction to it. But for now, here's a little teaser. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down Engine 2. What's that? It worked! It worked! Yay! Yay! It's only been like 6 months and it worked. Woo! So yes, episodes 1 through 3 are just kind of getting things situated and moved over. All of my supplies were loaded on cargo ships. Other ships were loaded on other dry docks and brought in. Most of the things were tugged in or pulled in. The ships that were capable of going under their own power pulled themselves in. And that was basically the first 3 episodes. Other episodes in the series were ship tours and showing you guys the vessels as they arrived. I thought this was fun. However, the audio is pretty terrible on those too. So I'm going to re-record those and I'll probably delete those videos because they're just tours and they're not actually showing anything that's actually going on the ships. Episode 4 is when things start to get a little bit more interesting. In fact, this was one of the first popular videos I had, and it was searching for oil. And by interesting, I mean we just kind of sailed in a direction looking for oil using a chart and then used our bottom bouncing sonar to try and figure out where the deposit was. I'll have you know that we did find that deposit and we brought the ship back. All in all, a pretty boring video too. But it did show that you guys were interested. Episode 5 is when audio starts getting a little bit better. But this is where I start getting the last of my ships here and officially the gameplay started for me. Now, I've always wanted a interactive kind of playthrough. I want you guys to interact with me and have some fun with me, but I never really knew how to get you guys to interact with me and enjoy the show as much as I do. So I've got a couple of projects that I did that would try to encourage people to leave comments, talk, and join the Discord, stuff like that, because I like interacting with you guys. Here at episode 5 is when things started to take a different direction. You see, with areas at war broken, I couldn't get certain things that I needed, like lithium, parts, components. I can't trade anymore. So one of the things I thought to do was called community projects, and this is still something that actively goes on, where the community contracts me to do certain projects in order to do some fun things, like, for example, the Alamo, which is episodes 6 through 8, where we're basically getting a battleship to redo the interior and still work on it. I'm still working on that ship today. It's just a large ship. In fact, Alamo's kind of fallen into the background, mostly just because it takes a huge drain on resources and it takes a lot of time to rebuild those resources. So as I rebuild resources, I'm working on other projects. But episodes 6, 7, and 8 are all about the Alamo arriving, getting some dry dock preparations, and it leads up to the big moment when episode 9, I launch my aircraft carrier, the Chimera. Now, this is where people start to get a little bit more interested because I'm doing things that I don't think anybody else has ever actually really done in Space Engineers, using real mechanics to actually do some pretty interesting things like launching an aircraft carrier. Episode 10 was a little bit boring. It was mostly just expanding the dry dock to be able to hold Alamo, because unfortunately, Alamo is the biggest ship I've ever actually had to handle. It's here when other things also took precedence as well. I started building a barge to help try and get me some food because algae is important for the basic survival needs of the game. I still don't have any seeds, so trying to get other crops going for food is a little bit harder. But now that there's fish at war installed, we're probably going to end up building a fishing vessel in the future. Episode 11's all about dry docking the Alamo, which is a huge, long process, and it took the entire episode to do. We start actually doing some work on the actual battleship in episode 12, although, like I said, it's a little bit interesting, but it's mostly just starting the work. There's a lot of work that goes into this process, and it's not just and we're done. Episode 13 is when we start talking about logistical issues and actually getting the barge launched to start and giving food. We also start talking about having to go and get bauxite and a few other things. Episode 14 is a little bit weird. I started putting engines inside the carrier. She still needs work. She's in the fitting out phase. It's going to be a long time before she's ready to go, but processes is a process. Episode 15, I decided to try and build a bridge to get access to aluminum plates. So the closest bauxite was over land and across a river. Now, this is where that whole river theory comes into play. I actually decided to try and build a bridge. And it took forever, and it was long and boring, and it's still not finished. And I'm regretting when I have to go back there and finish that bridge. Episode 16, we took a break from bridge building and went back to the Alamo and started working on the project. This is when I start to try and basically move projects in a pattern to try and get the episodes out a little bit better, but it falls through pretty quickly. Episode 17, we start doing some work on the bridge again, only this time we're also working on the sonar system for the Anubis, which is one of the brand new frigates that I had brought in on a dry dock as well. She's brand new, brand new. Like, she's not been finished yet. She still needed her sonar, so I put her in dry dock and got her fixed up. Episode 18. This is where it starts to get really fun. I start to remember that I needed to do other things. So, episode 18 is the start of Operation Shale. So, we needed to build some submarines and some preparations to start actually mining oil. Remember that from way, way, way long ago? This turned out to be a great choice because episode 19 and 20 just was all about Operation Shale and getting submarines built, loading them onto the ships, and then actually doing some dives, which was super fun, and getting the oil systems ready to go for when we get the rig ready to go. Episode 21 was all about building and designing the oil rig, which is still in process. It just takes a long time to build in this mode, especially since I don't use build and repair. There was a mini episode, episode 21A, which was just kind of showing that work was still being commenced on Alamo, and gave it a little quick tour about that. Episode 22 is some more preparations for Operation Shale, doing some work with the submarines, but also we launched Anubis and put her back in the water, which was also another process, but it took some time to do. And this is when my schedule took a turn. All the episodes kind of got all gibbledy. I'm still trying to get a set schedule back and put in order, but we're working on it. Episode 23 was about finally just deciding that I needed to just knock out tasks. So I put the Alamo's engines back inside the ship and fitted out the entire interior of the ship. This took a long time to do in real life, but this is when I decided that episodes needed to have more of a quality rather than a quantity. So rather than just taking an hour footage and then making it work, I decided to do an entire task dedicated per episode. Episode 24 is when I actually started getting the quality back up. I got new logos, I got new title cards, I got a lot of amazing things done. And we're starting to actually start Operation Group Sale because I decided that I was going to get areas that were working very, very soon. So I wanted to get as many ships working as quickly as possible because up until now, almost none of these ships were capable of defending themselves or each other or even the base. They were all just kind of for show at the moment. So episode 24, I decided to completely just start getting Erebus ready to go and get her back in the water and back in the fight after taking an anti-ship missile. And last but not least, episode 25. This is where I take Thunder's task of getting her to sea to heart. She's actually going to sea and she's actually doing a lot of work getting ready for Operation Group Sale. And now that she's ready to go, the real task is going to be actually getting the ships underway. So the next couple episodes are probably going to be about Operation Group Sale, getting the ships actually fighting and doing what they're supposed to be doing, especially now that Areas at War works. We're going to be able to actually use these ships in the capacity they need to be used. So, there's the journey as it stands right now. 25 episodes. It's ridiculous to think that I've made this many, and it's ridiculous to think that they're actually interesting or popular or whatsoever. Anyway, I'll talk a little bit about what's to come in the future. Um, I'm working on something big, and I hope you guys will enjoy. If you guys want to know what those are, I would definitely join my Discord. I'm not the person who's going to tell you to subscribe. I'm not going to be that kind of person at all. I feel like if you like my work, you're going to do what you need to do to be able to keep watching that work. Simple as that. I'll treat you like an adult if you treat me like one. That said, I hope you guys enjoyed this little recap episode, and I will look forward to seeing you in the future.